I'm giving you 30 seconds. 30 seconds to explain why you are entitled to even $1 from the woman you once called worthless. Alana Morrison's voice, sharp and steady, cut through the stunned silence of 500 guests in the grand ballroom. The light from the chandeliers shimmered on her emerald gown as she stared down at the man who had promised to love her, for better or worse. At table 12, Jake Henderson sat paralyzed, the color draining from his face as the crushing realization dawned. The mysterious benefactor who had just acquired his former boss's entire company was the very woman he had cast aside 3 years ago. The woman he had shamed in public. The woman he had labeled a burden. The woman who now held the fate of his financial world in her hands. There's a saying about karma. It can be patient, but its arrival is never a quiet affair. It shows up with interest, compounded daily, and brings a crowd to watch the reckoning. On this night, Alana Morrison was the embodiment of karma, and her +1 was an asset portfolio worth $1.2 billion. Hello, everyone. I hope this finds you well, no matter where you are in the world. Whether you're bundled up against the cold or soaking in the sun, I have a story for you that will surely warm your spirit and serve as a reminder that the universe occasionally delivers perfect justice. I am Alana Morrison, and this is the chronicle of my journey from pleading with my husband not to desert our ailing children to becoming the woman who could buy his entire world and sell it off before her lunch break. But before we get to the heart of tonight's confrontation, before we examine how a man can witness his wife working 3 jobs while their infant triplets fight for every breath and still decide to leave, I have a small request. Please hit the like button if you agree that people must be held accountable for the hearts they break. Subscribe if you believe that loyalty is a virtue to be rewarded and betrayal a debt that must be paid. And please share this story. Everyone needs to understand that abandoning your family in their darkest hour isn't just an act of cruelty. It's the single worst investment you could ever make. Let me take you back to the beginning, because every villain was once someone's hero. 3 years prior, Alana Morrison was a firm believer in forever. At 26, her world was built on 3 core beliefs: that love was unconquerable, that family was paramount, and that the man who held her hand in the delivery room would be there for life. She was convinced that marriage created an unbreakable team, a partnership designed to weather every storm, every hardship, every unforeseen twist of fate. Alana had first met Jake Henderson in her sophomore year at Howard University. He was a driven business administration major. She, a brilliant civil engineering student. They were united by dreams far larger than their mounting student debt. Jake often said it was her intellect he fell for first, the way she could mentally calculate structural load requirements while passionately arguing for the campus library's reinforcement. He was captivated by her ambition, her sharp mind, and her utter refusal to see barriers. They were married 2 years following their graduation in an intimate ceremony in her hometown of Richmond, Virginia. Alana's parents, both retired educators, had meticulously saved to give their only daughter the wedding she deserved. Jake's family was present, though their reluctance was palpable, marked by quiet remarks about the cultural gaps they would have to bridge. Alana chose to ignore their prejudices, focusing instead on Jake's heartfelt vows. "We're going to create something magnificent together," Jake had whispered to her during their first dance. "Your dreams, my dreams. We'll achieve them all. We are an unstoppable force, my love." And for 3 years, they truly were. Alana excelled at a mid-sized engineering firm, all while dedicating her weekends to nurturing her own construction consulting startup. Jake swiftly ascended the corporate hierarchy at Morrison & Associates, a real estate development firm where his natural charisma and networking prowess made him a rising star. They resided in a modest Silver Spring townhouse, channeling every spare dollar towards their mutual ambitions. Alana's goal of launching her own firm, and Jake's desire to become a partner at a top-tier company. When Alana learned she was carrying triplets, their reaction was a mixture of sheer terror and boundless joy. 3 babies meant 3 times the love, but also 3 times the cost, and 3 times the motivation to push themselves harder than ever. Jake personally painted the nursery, filling his weekends with assembling cribs and vetting the area's best pediatricians. "Three little engineers," he would joke, affectionately rubbing Alana's expanding belly. "They're destined to be brilliant, just like their mother." The pregnancy, however, was fraught with complications from the start. Alana was placed on bed rest for the final 2 months, unable to work, and they watched as their savings evaporated while their impending expenses soared. When Zoe, Marcus, and Amara were born 10 weeks early, a little over 2 years into their marriage, each weighing just under 3 pounds, their real battle began. The Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, NICU, became their second home. Alana all but lived at the hospital, mastering the art of changing diapers through incubator portholes and structuring her existence around feeding times and doctor's rounds. The babies required surgeries, highly specialized care, and round-the-clock monitoring. While insurance covered a significant portion of the medical bills, the indirect costs, parking, hospital meals, daily gas, specialized formulas, and future home equipment, accumulated with alarming speed, pushing their credit cards to the limit. Jake took on more hours, working weekends to keep them financially afloat. But somewhere between the 4th month in the NICU and the 6th consecutive sleepless night at home with 3 crying infants, a change began in Jake. He started missing doctor's appointments, citing last-minute work emergencies. His evenings at the office stretched later and later, often arriving home long after Alana had managed the bathing, feeding, and bedtime rituals for the triplets all by herself. When she tried to talk to him about the mounting pressure, he was distant, his attention fixed on his phone, always seemingly needed elsewhere. "I'm doing this for our family," he'd insist whenever she pleaded for him to be more present. "Someone has to secure our finances." But Alana couldn't ignore the subtle signs. The way he recoiled from Zoe's cries, his avoidance of holding Marcus after his difficult breathing treatments, the pained look on his face as he seemed to mentally tally the cost of every medication and therapy session their children required. What Alana was unaware of was that Jake's work meetings had evolved into lunches with his boss, Victoria Sterling. Victoria was beautiful, powerful, and recently divorced, and she was offering Jake more than just a path to career growth. She was offering him an escape, a return to the ambitious, unburdened man he was before the chaos of his new life. Victoria Sterling embodied everything Jake craved: a downtown penthouse, a summer estate in the Hamptons, and connections that could catapult his career. Above all, she offered a life free from constant worry, medical debt, and the reminder that true love often demands sacrifice over reward. "You're far too talented for this life," Victoria had murmured to him during one of their increasingly intimate dinners. "A man of your caliber shouldn't be constrained by circumstances you can't control." Jake's perception of his family began to warp. Where he once saw 3 resilient children fighting to survive, he now saw hindrances to his success. Where he once saw a brilliant partner building an empire, he now saw a woman whose energy was divided and whose own dreams were sidetracked by the very children he once eagerly awaited. The breaking point arrived on a crisp Tuesday in October. Marcus was hospitalized again, this time with pneumonia, his fragile lungs battling the severe infection. Alana had been at his bedside for 36 hours straight, fueled by vending machine coffee and sheer willpower. When she called Jake, begging him to bring a change of clothes and a real meal, he told her he was tied up at work. "It's only pneumonia, Alana. The doctors are handling it." "Only pneumonia?" she repeated, her voice cracking with disbelief. "Jake, he's our son. He needs his parents." "He needs medical experts," Jake retorted. "And I need to close this major deal with Sterling Properties. Some of us have to be realistic about the future." That evening, once Marcus was stable and Alana returned home, exhausted and emotionally shattered, she found divorce papers lying on the kitchen counter. Jake was gone. What was about to unfold would change the course of everything. Not just for Alana and her children, but for anyone who believed they could discard another person's worth without ever facing a reckoning. But first, Jake had a painful lesson to learn. Some choices are permanent, some bridges are burned forever, And some women possess a power far greater than the men who underestimate them could ever fathom. Alana stared at the divorce papers until the legalese, irreconcilable differences, division of assets, custody arrangements, melted into an incomprehensible blur. It was the language of a business deal, reducing 7 years of shared life into a transaction, as if love could be neatly categorized and filed away. A text from the hospital vibrated on the counter. Marcus was asking for his daddy. The nurses were wondering if Jake would be visiting that evening. Alana's gaze swept across their living room, at the smiling family photos on the walls and Jake's coffee mug still in the sink, and it struck her that she had no idea where her husband was sleeping. But let's rewind 6 months, because betrayal is not a sudden event. It is a slow-growing cancer, nourished by opportunity and rationalized by selfishness, until the person you trusted above all others becomes an unrecognizable stranger. When Alana first floated the idea of launching her own construction firm, Jake Henderson had been her most vocal champion. This was when the triplets were 6 months old, finally home but still demanding constant specialized attention. Many husbands might have urged their wives to focus solely on the children, but Jake, who had fallen in love with Alana's drive, understood her need to build. "You are the most brilliant engineer I know," he had affirmed one late night, as she drafted her business plan at the kitchen table, Zoe asleep in a carrier on her chest. "Morrison Construction is going to be revolutionary." Alana had managed to save $15,000 from her engineering career before the babies arrived. It was a modest sum, insufficient for an office or staff, but enough to secure licenses, purchase basic equipment, and start bidding on small-scale residential projects. She operated from her home, fielding calls during nap times, arranging site visits around medical appointments, and meticulously building her reputation one project at a time. The schedule was grueling but invigorating. Alana would devote her days to caring for 3 high-needs infants, then burn the midnight oil until 2 a.m., crafting proposals and scrutinizing construction plans. Jake would often find her slumped over her blueprints and would tenderly carry her to bed. "I am so incredibly proud of you," he'd whisper. "You are building our legacy." For that first year, his words were sincere. He would boast about Alana to his colleagues, proudly telling everyone how his wife was raising triplets while simultaneously launching a company. He used his vacation days to care for the children so Alana could attend crucial meetings and even helped her rehearse presentations, playing the part of skeptical clients to sharpen her pitches. But as Alana's client list steadily expanded, Jake's career hit a plateau, and his support began to curdle into resentment. He remained stuck in middle management at Morrison & Associates, watching as less experienced colleagues were promoted ahead of him. His salary saw only minor increases while his workload grew exponentially. The contrast was made sharper by his work friends, who wondered why a man so clearly intelligent and dedicated wasn't climbing the ladder faster. The unspoken reason, which Jake could never bring himself to admit, was that his home life made him appear less committed. He had to leave work promptly at 5 p.m. to help with the children. After-hours networking events were impossible. He had to decline travel assignments because the triplets' care was too complex for Alana to manage alone. Meanwhile, his boss, Victoria Sterling, appeared to navigate life with an effortless grace. Having recently divorced her tech mogul husband, Victoria now had sole control of Sterling Properties, her family's real estate empire, along with a massive settlement. At 34, she was strikingly beautiful and completely unburdened by the domestic ties that shackled Jake. Victoria started to notice Jake around the time the triplets turned 1. Her attention began with small professional gestures, seeking his opinion on major deals, praising his market analyses, and selecting him to represent the firm at industry events Alana couldn't possibly attend. "You have exceptional instincts, Jake," Victoria told him after he skillfully closed a challenging acquisition. "I believe you're ready for greater responsibility." Greater responsibility translated to longer hours, client dinners, and weekend strategy meetings that Victoria insisted were vital. Jake told himself he was doing it all for his family's financial security. But the reality was simpler and more selfish. Victoria's world was a much-needed vacation from his own. In her orbit, Jake was respected, successful, and unburdened. His presentations weren't interrupted by crying, his important calls weren't disturbed by breathing treatments, and his ambition was never questioned. Victoria saw him not as an exhausted father, but as the ambitious professional he once was. "Your wife is a very fortunate woman," Victoria remarked one evening as they finalized contracts over dinner at a chic downtown restaurant. "Not many men would put their careers on hold for their family as you have." The comment was a precisely aimed dart, and it hit its mark. Jake began to view his sacrifices not as acts of love, but as chains holding him back. He started to resent the pediatrician visits that caused him to miss client meetings. He grew irritated with Alana's constant exhaustion, which prevented her from attending corporate functions that could advance his career. And most dangerously, he started to fantasize about what his life could be if he had chosen a different path. While Jake grappled with his mounting discontent, Alana was quietly achieving the extraordinary. Morrison Construction had evolved from minor home repairs to significant commercial renovations. Her reputation for completing projects ahead of schedule and under budget spread, earning her contracts with local businesses and community groups. What Jake had no inkling of was that Alana had been shortlisted in a highly competitive bidding process for a colossal federal infrastructure project. The Department of Transportation was actively seeking minority-owned firms to spearhead a $750 million highway expansion, and against all odds, Morrison Construction had advanced past the initial stages. Alana had dedicated months to the proposal, working even later hours, collaborating with engineers nationwide, and devising innovative strategies that promised to save the government millions while generating hundreds of jobs. She kept the opportunity from Jake, not wanting to raise his hopes or her own. The probability of a 3-year-old startup winning such a contract was virtually non-existent. But the impossible sometimes materializes when preparation meets opportunity. And Alana Morrison had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The irony was devastating. As Jake grew bitter about the family duties he felt were stunting his career, Alana was proving that a black woman could build an empire while raising 3 medically fragile children. As he lamented that marriage and fatherhood had sabotaged his ambitions, she was demonstrating that love and tenacity could conquer any obstacle. The final blow to their marriage landed on a Thursday evening in September. Jake came home 2 hours late, citing another client dinner that ran long. Alana was in the midst of feeding the triplets, assisting Marcus with his nebulizer while Zoe gleefully tossed Cheerios onto the floor, and Amara toddled between the kitchen chairs. "How was your day?" Alana asked, the same question she posed every evening, clinging to the hope of reconnecting with the man she married. "Fine," Jake muttered, already heading for the stairs. "I need a shower." As he passed, Alana caught a faint, expensive floral scent, nothing like the unscented products they use due to the children's sensitivities. She then noticed a subtle lipstick smudge on his collar. But the most damning evidence was the way Jake purposefully avoided her gaze, his eagerness to wash away the traces of wherever he had truly been. Later that night, with the children finally asleep, Alana made a pivotal decision. She sat down at her laptop and began to meticulously document every red flag she had ignored, every flimsy excuse she had accepted, every instance her husband had prioritized someone else over his own family. She didn't know yet that the next morning would bring a phone call that would catapult Morrison Construction into a billion-dollar enterprise. She didn't know that Jake was finalizing his plans to leave her for Victoria Sterling. And she didn't know that her children, whom Jake increasingly viewed as burdens, would become her greatest wellspring of strength. All Alana knew was that she deserved better. Her children deserved better, and no matter what came next, she would face it with the same unyielding spirit that had seen her through medical challenges, a high-risk pregnancy, and countless sleepless nights in the NICU. Some women crumble when faced with betrayal. Others use it as fuel to construct something magnificent. Alana Morrison was about to prove she was firmly in the latter category. The call that changed the trajectory of her life came at 6:47 a.m. on a Friday, as Alana was preparing the Triplets bottles. Marcus had been up most of the night with a respiratory infection, and she was operating on 3 hours of sleep and sheer will when her phone displayed a Washington, D.C. area code. Ms. Morrison, this is Director Patricia Williams with the Department of Transportation. I hope you're sitting down. Alana collapsed into a kitchen chair, still cradling a softly wheezing Marcus. Yes, ma'am. Morrison Construction has been awarded the I-95 Corridor Expansion Project. The contract is valued at $750 million over the next 4 years. Congratulations, Ms. Morrison. You are now the youngest black female contractor to secure a federal infrastructure project of this scale. The bottle slipped from Alana's grasp, formula pooling on the floor as the magnitude of the words hit her. $750 million. Her small company, born from $15,000 in savings and sustained by late-night work and stubbornness, had just landed a contract that would cement her status as a major player in the industry. Ms. Morrison, are you still with me? Yes, I'm here. When do we begin? Preliminary meetings are scheduled for Monday. Full environmental approvals and the groundbreaking are set for January. I must say, Ms. Morrison, your proposal was nothing short of extraordinary. The innovation, the projected cost savings, the job creation, this is precisely the vision America needs for its infrastructure. Alana ended the call and looked down at Marcus, who had finally drifted off to sleep on her shoulder. $750 million. Enough to guarantee her children's medical care for life. Enough to transform Morrison Construction into a national powerhouse. Enough to validate every sleepless night, every rejected bid, and every moment she chose perseverance over surrender. She couldn't wait to tell Jake. But Jake was already gone. His side of the bed was untouched, his coffee mug was absent from the sink, and his work suits were missing from the closet. When Alana called his office, the receptionist informed her he had taken a personal day. By 2:00 p.m., she knew exactly where he was. Victoria Sterling's Mercedes was parked in the lot of the downtown Marriott, the same hotel Sterling Properties used for all its corporate functions. Jake's Honda was parked 3 spaces away. The confrontation she had been dreading for months finally occurred that evening when Jake walked in just as she was tucking the triplets into bed. Her day had been a dizzying oscillation between the elation of her professional triumph and the devastation of his betrayal. "We need to talk," Alana said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth as Jake entered. "Yes, we do," Jake replied, his tone cold and detached as if he were addressing a subordinate. "I've made some decisions about our future." "Our future?" Alana let out a humorless laugh. "That's ironic, because I just received the most incredible news about our future. And you weren't here to hear it." Jake placed a manila envelope on the kitchen counter. "Alana, this isn't working, and we both know it. The children require non-stop medical care. You're perpetually exhausted, and we have no time for each other. I believe we'll both be happier if we finally admit this marriage was a mistake." The words struck her like physical blows. A mistake? Our children are fighting for their health every single day, and you call our marriage a mistake? "I think we realized we want different things," Jake said, his tone rehearsed as if he'd practiced this speech in a mirror. "I've been offered a partnership at Sterling Properties. Victoria recognizes my potential. Frankly, she can provide opportunities that you can't." "Victoria?" Alana's voice began to rise. "You're abandoning your family for your boss? I'm choosing a future that is viable. Victoria's life doesn't involve constant complications. It doesn't come with a mountain of medical bills, sleepless nights, and perpetual crisis management. It comes with connections, financial stability, and a lifestyle that enhances my career instead of derailing it." Alana stared at the stranger wearing her husband's face. "Jake, I got the call this morning. Morrison Construction just won a $750 million federal contract. We are going to be more financially secure than we ever imagined. For a fleeting second, Jake's composure faltered. What? The I-95 expansion project. A 4-year, $750 million contract. I was going to surprise you, but it seems you've been busy with other arrangements. A flicker of what might have been regret crossed Jake's face, but it was swiftly replaced by a stubborn self-justification. That's wonderful, Alana, truly. But money can't fix all our problems. It doesn't make Marcus healthy. It doesn't restore the life we once had. Money provides our children with the best medical care on the planet. It means we never have to decide between Marcus's breathing treatments and the mortgage. It means Zoe gets the physical therapy she needs and Amara's heart surgery can be performed at the top children's hospital in the country. And what about us? Jake's voice cracked. What about the life we had planned before all of this? The travel, building our careers side by side, having time for each other. When was the last time we had a quiet dinner? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about a doctor's appointment? Something inside Alana fractured, but it wasn't her heart. It was the last remaining illusion she held about the man she had married. You are asking me to choose between my children and you. I'm asking you to be realistic about what our life has become. Our life became about love. It became about showing up for the people who depend on us. It became about proving that family is more than just convenience. Alana's voice dropped to a near whisper. But I guess you never got that memo. Jake opened the envelope and produced a thick stack of papers. I've already filed. I'm requesting joint custody, though we both know they're better off with you as the primary parent. I've also closed our joint savings and transferred my share to a new account. The details are in here. The room tilted. You emptied our savings? Jake, that was for the children's medical fund. Half of that money was mine. I am entitled to my share. Entitled? Alana's voice rose again. You feel entitled to abandon your sick children and take the money we saved for their care. I am entitled to a new beginning, free from the financial weight of choices I did not make. Choices you didn't make? Alana was yelling now, past the point of caring if the triplets woke. You didn't choose to have children with me? You didn't choose to marry me? You didn't vow to love me in sickness and in health? I didn't choose to have 3 medically complex children who will require constant care for the rest of their lives, he shouted back. I didn't choose to see my career stall while my wife builds a business I can never be a part of. I didn't choose to be a full-time caregiver instead of a husband. The toxic words hung in the air. Alana knew this single moment would define the rest of their lives. Jake was asking for her understanding, for sympathy for his selfishness, for forgiveness for deserting his children in their time of greatest need. Instead, she made a choice that would echo in Jake's mind for years. Get out. Alana, let's be civil about this. Get out of my house. Get away from my children. And Jake. Alana's voice was now lethally calm, the voice of a woman who had just discovered her own formidable power. When you finally realize what you've discarded, when Victoria grows bored of you and you grasp that you traded a family's unconditional love for a woman who views you as a temporary accessory, do not come back. Do not call. Do not dare ask for my forgiveness. Jake collected his documents and walked to the door, pausing only to say, "You'll see one day. This is for the best." But as the door clicked shut behind him, Alana knew with unwavering certainty that Jake Henderson had just made the costliest error of his life. He had walked away from a woman who had just secured $750 million. He had abandoned children who were destined for greatness. He had chosen fleeting comfort over enduring love. Most critically, he had catastrophically underestimated the woman Alana Morrison truly was, the woman who would spend the next 3 years building an empire in her children's names, the woman who would prove that true strength is forged when everything else is shattered, the woman who would one day stand in a ballroom filled with Washington's elite and make Jake Henderson wish he had never been born. But first she had to get through tomorrow, and the day after, and every day for the next 3 years, as she alchemized betrayal into the fuel for something truly magnificent. The first month after Jake's departure, Alana learned that being a single mother to 3 medically fragile toddlers while simultaneously launching a multi-million-dollar construction project was akin to performing open-heart surgery during an earthquake. Everything that could go wrong did, and every small victory came at a cost she feared she couldn't sustain. Marcus contracted pneumonia again the very week Alana was scheduled to finalize the contracts with the Department of Transportation. She spent 48 hours in the pediatric ICU, negotiating construction timelines by phone, while holding her son's small hand through a tangle of ventilator tubes. The federal project managers were sympathetic but unyielding. Any delays would trigger penalty clauses that could bankrupt Morrison Construction before it even got off the ground. "Ms. Morrison, we must have your signature on these documents by Friday," Director Williams stated during a video call from Marcus's hospital room. "The Congressional Appropriations Committee is watching closely, and any holdup could jeopardize the entire project." Alana balanced her laptop on her knees, with Zoe asleep in a nearby chair, and Amara playing with blocks on the floor. "I understand completely. My legal team is reviewing the final documents tonight, and you will have the signed contracts by Thursday." What Alana omitted was that her legal team was a single, overworked lawyer billing her at $200 an hour, money she could ill afford, and that she herself was scrutinizing the dense contracts at 2 a.m. between her children's cries. Meanwhile, Jake acclimated to his new life with stunning swiftness. Victoria Sterling wasted no time in making their relationship public, presenting Jake as her partner at industry galas, and giving him a prominent role in Sterling Properties marketing. In a matter of weeks, Jake was elevated from middle management to Victoria's chief advisor, overseeing major acquisitions and representing the firm in high-stakes negotiations. The change was both dramatic and deliberate. Victoria had him fitted for bespoke suits, coached him in the etiquette of the ultra-wealthy, and introduced him to a network of influential figures who could fast-track a career. To an outsider, Jake Henderson had traded up spectacularly. "He certainly landed on his feet," Alana's neighbor, Mrs. Chin, remarked one afternoon as they watched Jake's new BMW pull up to collect the children for their court-ordered weekend visit. "That's a significant upgrade from his old Honda." Alana remained silent, but she saw what Mrs. Chin missed. The way Jake never left the car, the way Victoria's nanny now handled the drop-offs, the way his visits were scheduled around his social calendar, treating his time with Zoe, Marcus, and Amara as an inconvenient obligation. The legal warfare began almost immediately. Jake's attorney, funded by Victoria, unleashed a barrage of motions designed to bleed Alana's finances dry and bully her into an unfavorable custody agreement. They questioned her capacity to provide a stable home while running a demanding company. They demanded extensive financial records from Morrison Construction, arguing Jake was entitled to spousal support, despite having left his family for a wealthier woman. Most cruelly, they argued the children would be better off in Jake's care, asserting that Victoria's wealth could provide superior medical and educational opportunities. "Your Honor," Jake's lawyer declared during one brutal hearing, "Mr. Henderson can now offer these children advantages Ms. Morrison simply cannot. Sterling Properties has connections to the nation's top pediatric specialists, and Ms. Morrison's demanding travel schedule raises serious concerns about her availability as a primary caregiver." Alana's lawyer, David Reyes, countered with passion and facts, but the resource disparity was stark. David was a lone practitioner fighting a team of 4 from a prestigious D.C. firm, all backed by Victoria's bottomless pockets. "Your Honor," David argued, "Ms. Morrison has never missed a single medical appointment, has always provided for her children's needs, and has built a successful company while being their sole caregiver. Mr. Henderson, in contrast, has seen his children a total of 12 times in 4 months, missed Marcus's recent surgery consultation, and has not attended a single one of Zoe's physical therapy sessions." The judge ultimately upheld the existing custody arrangement, but the legal bills were financially crippling Alana, Every hour in court was an hour away from Morrison Construction. Every dollar spent on legal fees was a dollar she couldn't put toward her children's care. The pressure was relentless. Alana would spend her days on construction sites and in engineering meetings, then race to pick up the triplets from daycare where the staff would invariably report on their difficult day. Marcus's respiratory issues left him irritable. Zoe's developmental delays required intensive therapy 3 times a week, and Amara, the healthiest, was acting out in response to the divorce. Evenings were a whirlwind of medications, breathing treatments, and bedtime routines that often stretched past 9 p.m. Only then could Alana return to her laptop, working on the I-95 project, until her eyes burned with fatigue. The irony was gut-wrenching. Morrison Construction was soaring, but she was too overwhelmed to feel the success. The federal contract had already attracted other major projects, and while she was earning more than she ever dreamed, she was also working 18-hour days completely alone. Jake, on the other hand, appeared to have it all. He had the children every other weekend, playing the role of the fun dad who showered them with expensive gifts, while Alana managed the daily grind of medical care, discipline, and household chores. He had even managed to rewrite their history. In interviews with business journals about his meteoric rise, Jake painted himself as a devoted father who had made painful sacrifices for his children. He spoke eloquently about co-parenting children with special needs and the importance of securing their financial future. "My ex-wife is doing incredible things with her firm," Jake told DC Business Journal. "We are both deeply committed to ensuring our children have every possible advantage, which is why I've chosen a path that can guarantee their long-term medical care." Alana read the article in the waiting room at Marcus's lab appointment and felt a cold fury settle in her chest. Jake was co-opting her success, positioning himself as the responsible one, and implying their divorce was a mutual pragmatic decision. The narrative was so polished that at times Alana found herself questioning her own memories. Victoria Sterling was the puppet master behind Jake's public image rehabilitation. She had transformed him from a man who abandoned his sick children into a tragic hero. At charity events, Victoria would speak movingly of Jake's dedication. Jake could have taken the easy road, she told a crowd at a United Way fundraiser. But he chose to build something that could truly serve his children's needs. That is the kind of integrity Sterling Properties values. The performance was so convincing that Washington's business elite bought it completely. Jake Henderson was no longer a deadbeat dad. He was a strategic visionary. And Alana Morrison was no longer the abandoned wife building an empire. She was the difficult ex who failed to see what was best for her own children. But Alana knew the truth, and she was keeping meticulous records. Every missed visit, every skipped doctor's appointment, every time he sent an assistant for pickup. Most importantly, she was building something Jake could never claim, touch, or take away. Morrison Construction was becoming an industry force, and Alana was earning a reputation for excellence that no amount of Victoria's PR could tarnish. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday in March, 6 months after Jake had left. Alana was at the I-95 site reviewing safety protocols when she received a frantic call from the daycare. "Ms. Morrison, you need to come now. Marcus is having an asthma attack, and his father isn't answering any of his emergency numbers." It was Jake's scheduled day to pick up the children. Instead, Marcus was in respiratory distress. Zoe was in tears because she'd missed her therapy, and Amara was asking why her daddy never showed up when he promised. Alana raced to the daycare to find Marcus pale and frightened, clutching his emergency inhaler. The director pulled her aside, her frustration barely veiled. "Ms. Morrison, this is the 3rd time this month Mr. Henderson has been a no-show. We've called his office, his mobile, and the emergency line he provided. No one can locate him." Alana bundled her 3 distraught children into her car, canceling a major client meeting and upending her week to cover for Jake's parental failure. As she drove Marcus to the pediatrician, she finally accepted that Jake's new life had eclipsed any sense of responsibility he had for their children. That evening, Jake finally called, offering a casual apology and a convoluted excuse about a last-minute business trip. He spoke as if his failure was a minor inconvenience. "I'll make it up to them next weekend," he promised breezily. Victoria got tickets to the circus. But Alana was finished with his excuses, done with enabling his selfishness, and done with protecting his reputation at her children's expense. The next morning, she made 2 calls. The first was to her lawyer, instructing him to file for sole custody. The second was to a private investigator. If Jake Henderson wanted to treat their children's lives like a game, Alana Morrison was about to ensure she had all the pieces she needed to win. The private investigator's report arrived on a Thursday morning in April, a plain manila envelope that would obliterate the last remnants of Alana's faith in humanity. She had hired Rebecca Martinez to document Jake's parental shortcomings, expecting proof of missed visits and neglect. What she found was far worse. Jake wasn't just a negligent father. He was a criminal. "Ms. Morrison, you're going to want to be sitting down for this," Rebecca had warned her. "What I discovered goes far beyond a custody dispute." At 5 a.m., in her silent kitchen, Alana opened the folder. It contained photographs, financial statements, and legal documents that laid out a story of calculated fraud. Jake hadn't just left his family for Victoria. He had systematically plundered their assets. The first photo showed Jake's signature on a mortgage for a luxury Georgetown condo purchased for $1.2 million, with a $240,000 down payment financed through Sterling Properties. The date on the document was 3 weeks before he filed for divorce. The next page revealed the source of that down payment, a series of withdrawal slips from the joint savings account he claimed to have split fairly. Instead of taking his half of their $30,000, Jake had been draining the account for 6 months, funneling the money into a private investment account to fund his new life. But the most devastating discovery was on page 12. Jake had taken out a second mortgage on their family home, forging Alana's signature electronically from old loan documents to secure a $150,000 home equity loan. The money had been deposited into his personal account and then immediately transferred to Sterling Properties as a buy-in for his future partnership. Alana stared at the forgery, her vision blurring. Jake hadn't just left them with no savings. He had stolen their home's equity. The very house she was fighting to keep for her children was now mortgaged to the hilt, one missed payment away from foreclosure. The betrayal was meticulously planned. While Alana was working 18-hour days to keep her company afloat and care for their children, Jake had been funding his escape with money meant for their medical care. And the cruelest revelation was still to come. Rebecca's investigation had uncovered the true timeline of Jake's affair with Victoria. It hadn't started after the children were born. It had begun over 2 years prior when Alana was pregnant and on bed rest. The hotel records date back 26 months, Rebecca's report stated. Sterling Properties has a corporate suite at the Marriott, and Mr. Henderson has been a frequent guest since your 7th month of pregnancy. The staff remembers him because he always requested the same suite, often for the entire weekend. 26 months. Jake had been cheating on her while she was carrying their children, while she was terrified of premature labor, while she was praying for their survival. The time-stamped security photos were irrefutable. Jake entering the hotel on a Saturday while Alana was confined to bed. Jake and Victoria leaving for a romantic dinner while Alana ate takeout alone. Jake holding Victoria's hand in the lobby on the very day Marcus had been rushed to the ER. Every memory of the last 3 years was violently reframed. His distance during her pregnancy wasn't stress, it was guilt. His reluctance to be at the hospital wasn't discomfort. It was impatience to be with Victoria. His complaints about the strain of their children's needs weren't honest concerns. They were excuses to justify an affair that had been going on all along. Perhaps most damning was Jake's real motive. According to financial records Rebecca obtained from a source inside Sterling Properties, Victoria was planning to take her company public. As her husband, Jake would gain significant equity. The divorce wasn't about escaping responsibility. It was a calculated financial move to position himself for a massive windfall. He had weighed the value of his wife and children against Victoria's fortune and decided the trade was worth it. The final piece of evidence was a recorded conversation between Jake and Victoria captured by the investigator. "Once this is all settled, you'll have everything you've ever wanted." Victoria's voice was dismissive. The custody agreement minimizes your obligations. Alana will be too swamped with her little construction company to be a problem, and we can focus on our future. I just worry she'll come after us later, Jake whined. The kids are expensive. If her company fails, she might seek more support. Darling, Victoria purred. By the time our IPO closes, you'll be worth $50 million. Whatever your ex-wife does with her life will be utterly irrelevant. Alana listened to the recording 3 times, each playback peeling back a new layer of betrayal. Jake wasn't just leaving. He was actively ensuring they would struggle. Victoria wasn't just his escape. She was encouraging him to view his own children as financial liabilities. The realization that followed was even more devastating. She had never truly known Jake Henderson. The man she had loved, married, and built a life with was either a complete fabrication or had been so corrupted by greed that nothing of his former self remained. The morning after she reviewed the report, Alana made a series of calls that would set a new course. First, she contacted her lawyer to initiate criminal proceedings against Jake for fraud and forgery. Second, she reported the fraudulent home equity loan to her bank. Third, she reported potential ethics violations to the Department of Transportation, given that Sterling Properties was bidding on federal contracts. But her most important call was to a child psychologist. Her children deserved to know the truth about their father, not the sordid details, but the reality that his absence was not their fault. Sometimes, people make choices that reveal who they truly are, Alana explained to a 3-year-old Zoe that evening. Daddy chose to live with someone else, and that tells us he's not ready to be the daddy you deserve. Marcus, his small face serious, looked up from his nebulizer. Is Daddy coming back? Looking at her brave, fragile son, Alana knew Jake had abandoned a child destined for greatness. No, sweetie. Daddy isn't coming back. But that doesn't mean you're not loved. Mommy loves you enough for both of us, and we are going to build a beautiful life together. We're going to be okay, Mommy? Amara asked, climbing into her lap. For the first time since the divorce papers appeared, Alana answered with complete certainty. Yes, baby. We're going to be better than okay. We are going to be unstoppable. That night, Alana sat at her kitchen table and listed everything Jake had taken. The money, the security, the belief in partnership. But he had also taken something else, her willingness to suffer injustice quietly. He had created an enemy he didn't even know he had. While Jake was planning his future with Victoria, Alana Morrison was planning to become the kind of woman who could dismantle a person's world with the same casual efficiency he had used to dismantle hers. Morrison Construction was no longer just a business. It was about to become a weapon. Jake Henderson thought he had committed the perfect crime. He was about to learn that Alana Morrison was a far more formidable opponent than the exhausted mother he had left behind. The criminal investigation into Jake's fraud, which should have been Alana's path to justice, instead became the instrument of her complete ruin. Victoria Sterling had spent years cultivating relationships with powerful figures in D.C.'s legal and political circles. When Alana filed criminal charges, Victoria mobilized her entire network to protect her asset. The first sign of trouble was a call from Detective Sarah Martinez, the financial crimes investigator. Ms. Morrison, we've encountered a problem with your fraud claim. Mr. Henderson's attorney has provided documents suggesting you authorized the loan and the transfers. The electronic signatures match the digital certificate from your business account. Alana sat in her car, the world tilting beneath her. Detective, I never authorized those transactions. I understand, but his attorney claims you agreed to these transfers as part of a joint venture with Sterling Properties to benefit your own construction contracts. The accusation was diabolically clever. Victoria's legal team had reframed the theft as a legitimate business deal gone sour, painting Alana as a bitter ex-wife weaponizing the law. Furthermore, the detective continued, Sterling Properties has filed a counter-complaint, alleging that you are filing false charges to harass Mr. Henderson. They are requesting an investigation into you for filing a false police report. The investigation that was meant to expose Jake's crimes now targeted Alana. Her business dealings, her client relationships, every contract she had won were now under a microscope. The Department of Transportation, wary of the negative press, launched its own ethics investigation, questioning if Alana had used insider information from Jake to win bids. Every success she had achieved was now reframed as potentially fraudulent. The legal assault was relentless. The fraud charges against Jake were dismissed after Victoria's lawyers produced fabricated evidence. Meanwhile, the investigation into Alana dragged on for months, forcing her to hire more lawyers she couldn't afford. The custody battle intensified, with Victoria's team filing motion after motion to drain Alana's resources and portray her as an unstable parent obsessed with revenge. The judge, swayed by their carefully constructed narrative, began to see Alana exactly as they described her and modified the custody arrangement to give Jake more time with the children. The final, crushing blow came when Alana discovered that Sterling Properties had purchased the fraudulent home equity loan from the bank. Victoria Sterling now held the mortgage on Alana's home and was demanding full payment within 30 days. "Business is business," Victoria's lawyer said coolly over the phone. Alana's home, the sanctuary she had fought to protect for her children, was about to be seized by the very woman who had stolen her husband. The business consequences were catastrophic. Clients canceled contracts, nervous about the federal investigation. The I-95 project was suspended indefinitely. Years of hard work and a sterling reputation were erased in months. Alana poured her savings into legal fees and a desperate attempt to save her home, taking out loans against her equipment and maxing out every line of credit. The celebrated entrepreneur was now secretly filing for personal bankruptcy. The isolation was almost as painful as the financial ruin. Colleagues avoided her. Friends stopped calling. The stress took a physical toll, and Alana collapsed with pneumonia the same week Marcus was hospitalized again. When her illness caused her to miss 2 court dates, Jake's attorneys used it as proof of her instability. The morning she received the final foreclosure notice, she sat in her nearly empty home, most of her furniture sold to pay legal bills, and realized Victoria Sterling had won. She had taken a woman with a $750 million contract and reduced her to nothing. The lowest point came when Jake arrived at her door with a court order and a moving truck. "Alana, this doesn't have to be difficult," he said, standing on the porch of the house he had helped steal. "The judge believes the children need stability, which I can provide." Behind him, Victoria waited in her Mercedes, her expression a mask of feigned sympathy. She had orchestrated Alana's complete downfall and was now here to claim her prize: temporary custody of the children she had helped Jake abandon. The custody order felt permanent. Zoe, Marcus, and Amara would live with Jake and Victoria for 6 months while Alana sought court-mandated counseling and proved she could provide stable housing. As Jake loaded her children's belongings into Victoria's car, Alana watched from the window, understanding she had lost everything. That night, alone in the house she would lose in a matter of days, Alana sat on the floor where her kitchen table once stood and confronted the wreckage of her life. Victoria Sterling had won. But as Alana sat in the darkness, a new resolve began to form. Victoria had made one critical error. She assumed that a broken woman would stay broken. She had never faced an opponent who could channel utter devastation into pure, unyielding determination. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The call that saved Alana's life came from Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the pediatric cardiologist who had operated on Amara's heart. "Miss Morrison," she said, "I've been following your situation. I sit on the board of Children's Medical International, and we're looking for a construction partner for our new hospital complex in Atlanta." Alana, surrounded by foreclosure notices, could barely process the words. "Dr. Rodriguez, my company is complicated right now." "That's precisely why I'm calling," the doctor replied. "We don't want the biggest firm. We want someone who understands what it means to fight for a child's life. Your reputation before this mess was impeccable." The project was a massive $400 million pediatric medical center. The board was prepared to offer a signing bonus that could solve her immediate financial problems. It was a lifeline, but it came with an impossible choice. Taking the project meant relocating to Atlanta, leaving her children in the care of the very people who had destroyed her. It meant choosing her long-term ability to provide for them over her immediate need to be with them. That night, she drove to Jake's new mansion and watched her children through the window. They were surrounded by luxury but cared for with a cold efficiency. She saw then that Jake and Victoria had given them everything but what they needed most: unconditional love. The choice became painfully clear. She could stay and fight a losing battle, or she could go and build an untouchable fortress for their future. "I'm not abandoning you," she whispered. "I'm building us a future no one can ever take away." The Atlanta contract provided a $50 million signing bonus, instantly stabilizing Morrison Construction's finances. More importantly, it surrounded Alana with a team that shared her mission. For the first time in months, her personal experience with medically fragile children was seen as an asset, not baggage. 6 months into the project, her private investigator, Rebecca Martinez, called with a breakthrough. She had uncovered evidence that even Victoria's influence couldn't bury. Hotel records proving Jake left the children unattended for days, missed medical appointments, and most damningly, recordings from Victoria's own security system. "These children are exhausting," Victoria's voice was captured, saying to her assistant. "I cannot wait until we can send them back to their mother. Jake is useful, but he comes with more baggage than I anticipated. Once our IPO is complete, I'll be ready to move on." The recordings were legal, authenticated, and proved that Victoria saw the children as disposable inconveniences. Alana now had the weapon she needed. She wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. She was fighting to protect her children. The Children's Medical International Hospital complex opened 18 months ahead of schedule and $40 million under budget, a triumph that made national news. The gala celebrating its completion was held in a grand ballroom in Atlanta. Alana had ensured executives from Sterling Properties were on the guest list, knowing Victoria's ego wouldn't let her miss it. When Alana took the stage, she looked nothing like the broken woman from 3 years prior. She was powerful, poised, and ready. "3 years ago," she began, her voice ringing with clarity, "I was a mother fighting to keep my children alive while my life collapsed. Tonight, I am the CEO of a company dedicated to ensuring no family has to endure what mine did." She looked directly at Table 12. "And now a presentation I like to call The Price of Betrayal." The screens behind her lit up. The first slide was a detailed timeline of Jake's affair with Victoria, backed by hotel records and text messages. The next detailed the financial fraud with bank records and forged documents. Then came the bombshell. Evidence of Victoria's own widespread corporate fraud, uncovered by Rebecca's investigation. "The Department of Justice has been investigating Sterling Properties for 18 months, Alana announced, and I provided them with the initial evidence." The final section played the security footage from Victoria's home. The entire ballroom heard Victoria complain about the children, discuss her plans to discard Jake, and instruct her staff to cut costs on their medical care. "Ms. Sterling built her empire on fraud and cruelty," Alana declared. "She stole my husband not out of love, but convenience. She took my children not to care for them, but to punish me. But here is what she didn't understand. You cannot destroy someone who refuses to be broken. You cannot defeat someone who turns pain into purpose." The screens then flashed the true success of Morrison Construction. Contracts for 5 more pediatric facilities, a company valuation of $1.2 billion, and every project named in honor of her children. The Zoe Morrison Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation, the Marcus Morrison Wing for Respiratory Care, and the Amara Morrison Foundation for Cardiac Treatment. I turned the pain you gave me into a legacy you could never touch. As the room erupted in applause, FBI agents entered the ballroom and moved toward Victoria's table. "The FBI will be executing search warrants at Sterling Properties tomorrow morning," Alana announced calmly. As Victoria was escorted out in handcuffs, Alana turned her attention to Jake, who sat ashen-faced, the full weight of his choices finally crashing down on him. "Was it worth it, Jake?" she asked softly. "Was her money worth losing your children?" He had no answer. In her final announcement, Alana pledged $100 million to establish the Morrison Family Foundation, dedicated to providing legal and financial aid to families fighting wealthy, manipulative opponents in custody battles. Her personal devastation had been transformed into systemic change. The 18 months that followed saw justice served. Victoria Sterling was convicted on 23 counts of fraud and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Her empire was dismantled. Jake, who testified against her to avoid prison, lost everything else: his career, his reputation, and any meaningful relationship with his children. The family court immediately reversed the custody order, granting Alana full and sole custody. Morrison Construction thrived, becoming a global force for good. The triplets, now happy and healthy, grew up knowing their mother was a hero who had built an empire in their name. Alana found love again with David Aonkwo, a philanthropist who celebrated her strength and adored her children. Years later, at an award ceremony honoring her for the completed I-95 project, Alana came face to face with a remorseful Jake. He apologized, but Alana, now secure in the beautiful life she had built, knew his regret no longer had power over her. "My life isn't about your redemption anymore, Jake," she told him calmly. "I've taught our children that their worth is not determined by the people who abandon them." 5 years after the gala, Alana married David, with Zoe, Marcus, and Amara walking her down the aisle. Her company expanded internationally, always staying true to its mission. Jake slowly and humbly began to rebuild a relationship with his children, based on consistent action rather than empty promises. Victoria Sterling was eventually released from prison into a world that had forgotten her. Alana's story became a beacon of hope. It was proof that betrayal does not have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something extraordinary. The woman Jake Henderson had called worthless became worth over $1 billion. The children he abandoned became remarkable, and the empire built on their names stood as a testament that some legacies are built not on what is taken, but on what is given back to the world.